Hello and welcome. You're watching The Mojo Story, and I'm Barkha Dutt. Twitter is the latest battlefield between the Modi government and the opposition parties. This after several Congress handles, including the party's official handle, found themselves temporarily locked out. Twitter says that there has been a clear violation both of the law of the land and of its own guidelines. The opposition is saying Twitter has done this on government orders. Let's bring up our top story today. This is what has happened on this day when the government and the opposition are at loggerheads. The Congress says that accounts running into the thousands of its workers and supporters have been locked out, including those of several prominent leaders. This has happened after Rahul Gandhi's own account was temporarily locked out. The Congress is taunting the Prime Minister, saying, Modiji, just how afraid are you? But Twitter is saying that it actually acted in response to a notice by a child panel protection panel that says that pictures shared on Congress handles of the family of a recent rape victim were in violation of the laws of the land. Who's to blame? Was the Congress in violation of the law, or is there something more going on here? Those were the pictures that actually got Rahul Gandhi into trouble, blurred on our screen after this outcry over whether they give away the identity of the Dalit victim. Now, the question is this: is Twitter politically biased, as the opposition alleges, or is the opposition looking for issues to embolden its own positioning in the larger political discourse? That is our big story on the program today. And let's introduce our panel of experts as Twitter becomes the latest battlefield between Modi and the opposition. Salman Soz, a leader of the Congress party, is with us. We're also joined by PKD Nambiar, who's a political analyst. Let's welcome him to the program. We're also joined by Flavia, Agnes, one of our best-known feminist lawyers, who might be able to shine a light on whether the Congress was in fact in violation of the laws. And we're joined by Pranesh, Prakash, who is, I think, someone who understands technology and the law and the interface better than anyone else. And we're also joined, very interestingly, and delighted to welcome him to our platform for the very first time today, is Aprameya Radhakrishnan, who's the co-founder of Coup. Coup was often considered in particular by BJP supporters, as the platform to go to when they said that Twitter is politically biased. I bring this up only because both parties at different moments has called Twitter a politically biased platform. So that's what makes this conversation so interesting. Salman, let me start by asking you, what is the basis to believe that this is a government directed development? In fact, there's a very funny tweet. I say funny because it's witty, by one of the Congress members that is calling what's happened a lok tantra as opposed to a lok tantra, which is an interesting pun, and we can bring that up and show you what that joke is all about. But as we do that, Salman, what are the stakes here? Clearly, the stakes are high and they're not funny.
The stakes are very high. They're very high for not just the Congress party, they're very high for the country. Nothing happens, as you know, Barkha, and everybody on this panel, everybody knows in India now without the government deciding something. So for the last 6 days, the leader of the main opposition party is without a Twitter account, access to his Twitter account. Many Congress leaders are without access to their Twitter accounts. The Twitter handle of the Congress party, which fought for India's freedom, is now locked. And all this does not happen because Twitter believes that there's been a violation of the law. And Twitter is not a law enforcement agency. Twitter has its rules, and Twitter can temporarily suspend accounts, and it has happened in the past, and I'm sure it'll happen in the future. Twitter was not to adjudicate cases. That is for the law enforcement of this country. Twitter cannot basically say that we will punish according to the laws of the country. Law enforcement, that's with the courts and the police. let
But
that
what
case
is
go
your
forward.
basis?
As far as
What
Twitter
is
is
your
concerned,
basis to believe?
our
What is
country,
your Yeah, go
I
ahead.
understand what you're saying. What was the basis to believe
Yeah.
that, to my mind, the most insecure prime minister that India has ever had? Why is after with so much control of the media, with millions of followers on social media, tens of millions of followers on social media, big financing from big business, a huge troll army. Narendra Modi still seems to be petrified whenever Rahul Gandhi goes and lends an empathetic ear to
Okay.
somebody from a marginalized community. They're
Okay.
petrified. Now, this is not about just an intermediary in some ways. This is Narendra Modi and the BJP and the RSS trying to stifle all dissent.
Okay, you're saying that this is an attempt to stifle dissent. Let me just get responses to this. I want to understand from Pranesh, what's actually going on here, because this is a platform that has been accused of being politically biased by both parties. Pranesh, yeah.
Yes, so I see there as being four distinct issues. One is the question of whether there was a violation of the law. And I would say, prima facie, there seems to have been a violation. Two, I believe that the law itself is unjust, as at least how it has been interpreted by the Supreme Court in Nipun Saxena case in 2018. It's unjust, it's highly reasons for why it exists. Three, Twitter's response, they seem not to have cited violation of a law, but rather violation of their policies, of their community standards. And I'm not sure how this tweet actually violates their community standards. Four, separately, there's the question of bias and in application of their standards and as well as application of the law. And to me, it seems quite clear that it is not even application. There are instances floating around, for instance, on Twitter itself, of other political parties' media cells and the leaders of their media cells actually having tweeted out interviews with family members of the Hathras rape victim, and that not having been, and their account not having been taken down by Twitter.
Yeah.
Evenly
Go
applied.
ahead. Pranesh, go ahead. Pranesh, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. So I'm just saying that in terms of uneven application of the community standards of Twitter and of the law, I think it is quite clear that it has not been applied evenly at all.
So you actually do think that in this particular case, there has been some evidence of bias, especially when you're invoking Amit Malviya's tweet. That's the tweet you're talking about when we talk about the Hathras case.
Yes, and the bias I'm not saying is only on Twitter's part. It's clearly on the part of law enforcement and other institutions of the government as well.
Okay, let me actually open this up for responses from other guests. I can let me just bring in Aprameya at this point, who is the co-founder of Coup. Coup, of course, has attracted a lot of attention because it was seen as the platform of choice for the right wing. Ironically, Aprameya, at a time when the BJP was finding Twitter bias. So go ahead and tell us how you see this controversy.
So I think Coup and any other microblogging platform, we at Coup especially, we act as a technology platform. We enable freedom of expression for every Indian and every citizen of any country that we operate in, right? And of course, it is very important that we are guided by the law of the land that we operate, and there are policies, right? So in our case, if a piece of content is reported to be against the law of land, there is a further action required on the content as required by an authorized law enforcement agency. That appropriate action will be taken on that piece of content. Require you to entirely ban somebody from expressing themselves at all, right? And our policies also say so. So I think it's very important to be able to understand the nuances of the Indian context, right? So a global law of, I will take down an entire account and stop expression is something that probably is not valid in India. It might be valid in some other country. So I think that's where the importance of understanding local nuances, local law, and navigating based on the circumstances is very important, right? So it's not a one size fit all globally. India is a very special market. We ourselves have so many languages, so many cultures. I think developing a system, uh, of a system like a microblogging platform, which is adapting to the Indian nuances, is very important, and that's what we do at.
How do you see the shade of bias, Aprameya? Before I open it up, I see Salman is back with us, Karuna Nundy is joining us. How do you see what Pranesh said about a double standard in this particular case, that the Hathras family was able to be shown by the BJP spokesperson, but that privilege is not accorded to the Congress?
I think when there is lack of transparency and there is inconsistency in behavior, it comes across as biases, right? Very clearly, there have been scenarios where there has been inconsistent behavior, right? Across geographies, across everything. So I think the problem is the inconsistent and not so transparent behavior that is making everybody look like as though it is biased. Like even coup was accused to be biased, but we are not, right? So we are trying to do is bring in a lot of transparency, consistency, and also make sure that we adapt to the nuances required of the Indian market and be true to it. And it's a very 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 open platform to to create because of the kind of lacuna that is there in social media.
Okay, let me take this to Karuna. Karuna and Flavia, if I can just get perspectives from you. Twitter would argue that this has happened in response to a notice from the Protection Panel, and that willy-nilly, by showing the family, the parents of this victim, the identity of the girl has been given away as well. How would you respond to that?
I think that the law is actually quite clear, which is that Section 228A says that you can't carry, and it's not just the fact. I mean, I hope that it's not just the fact that it came from a government panel, whether it's the Child Protection Panel or otherwise, but the law says that you cannot disclose details that then lead to the disclosure of the identity of a child who has been sexually assaulted. And I think that that is correct, actually. And to those who say that this is patriarchal, I think this is nonsense, because the choice should be the person who is sexually assaulted. And if you are a child in particular, then your identity must be protected, given that it, and it really should be up to you. However, let's zoom out a bit. That was one tweet. To suspend temporarily or otherwise an entire account for this reason, and in fact, a huge number of opposition accounts, Congress accounts, appear to have been, people have been locked out of their accounts, is hugely overboard. And that's something that is a problem. Now, let's look at, let's take a phrase that has become quite famous. Let's look at the chronology. In February, a large number of accounts, including the person in charge of Prasar Bharati, was limited by Twitter. In March, I think about the 1st of March, various Twitter and Facebook employees were threatened with arrest by government. And it was widely condemned as being against the rule of law, right? And now we have a situation where a large number of Congress accounts are suddenly being suspended, which is in a way that is definitely overboard. So I think that we've got to look at the fact that releasing a person's identity, whether it's
Yeah.
under POCSO or under Section 228A, is something that happens only under very peculiar circumstances, right? If you're an adult, you have to give an affidavit that is not just released directly by you, but through a centrally or recognized social welfare organization, right?
Right.
So there is
Right.
a way in which you can waive that. But absent that, and there were lots of people who came to me for legal opinions around the Nirbhaya time, saying that
But I was just going to jump in there and say that
yeah,
Asha Devi, who was Nirbhaya's mother,
yeah,
not just chose to assert her identity, but also wanted her daughter's identity. She wanted her daughter not to be called Nirbhaya, this euphemism that a country foisted on her, but to be known by her own name. And I'm quite confused. Are we saying that the victim in Hathras, her parents could not be identified? Are we saying that in this particular case, the Delhi Cant case, as it's called, the mother cannot be identified if she so chooses? Are we saying that Asha Devi was in violation of the law in coming out without her face disguised, and that all of us who showed pictures of Asha Devi and did interviews with her can get our Twitter accounts locked? Karuna, and briefly, and then Flavia, the same question.
So when this was first happening and Ashaji's speech on how she spoke of her daughter varied a little, I thought that perhaps she wasn't aware of the law and that she wanted her daughter's name to be taken. Right? Last look at the chronology is actually Amit Shah before it was me. Now, in such a circumstance, various news organizations came to me for a legal opinion, and I said that look, if she wants to place her daughter's name on record in the public domain, then
Yeah.
there's a fairly simple procedure. It's not as simple as it could be, but she has to execute an affidavit, and then it has to be released to social central
I
social welfare.
understand,
And
but are we?
she
Yeah, hang
refused.
on.
She applied her mind, and on the
Yeah.
facts of that case, she refused point blank, and she said, "No, I do not want this to happen." So you see, I think that it serves a positive purpose, which is that you have to have you get an opportunity to think
Okay.
about it properly.
Okay. Fair enough. Flavia, do you want to just join? Do you want to just add to that, and then I want to go to Mr. Nambiar. Flavia, Agnes.
Yeah, I guess there is for POCSO there is definitely a law for child sexual abuse. There is also media restraint on trials of adult women who are sexually abused because of this very high, highly curiosity from the media to sensationalize every rape case, and it is in that context this had been brought in to the demands of the women's movement that identity should not be exposed.
But does
And
that extend to the parents? And I'll tell you why this is a very problematic argument with respect, Flavia. It means if someone wants to humanize, what's happened to their child, not be a mere statistic, there is no way to tell the trauma of rape or murder because a blur or a silhouette is just not the same as a person's first person account of their own life.
Actually, I tend to agree with you, though the law is calm and is in place, particularly like cases of rape and murder, where the person is no more, and using that person's name in a way, not using the name and not using the identity undermines the impact it would have when the story is told. Whatever be that as it may, but here you have a case which is very, very fresh and coming out, and there's a lot of media attention on that. And showing the face is definitely violative of the law that is there. But having said that, other people have mentioned a number of instances where this has been done and not taken seriously. The media gives all kinds of details and nobody has taken it seriously. So while the
Okay.
law is there, it is used very selectively, and that is the problem. As somebody mentioned earlier, that evenness is not there, hence it amounts to bias. then it discriminates
Yeah,
about
can
certain
we
people
bring up
say.
that Amit Malviya tweet, which is what everybody's referencing to, that the application of the law is not even-handed, which is what leads to the perception of bias. PKD Nambiar, when you're looking at this tweet by Amit Malviya, how would you respond to the fact that there's bias?
So let me tell you that there are two things we are discussing today. One is the Twitter and the inconsistent views of Twitter. And Twitter, rather than behaving like a intermediary or a microblogging site, they behave themselves as a larger than life, or the country's law and rules do not apply to them. That kind of a behavior, we have discussed it multiple times, and I think my stand is very clear that Twitter should behave themselves. They have no right, whether it is Rahul Gandhi, whether it is Barkha Dutt or a PKD Nambiar, they cannot take any kind of a decision unless and until the country's law. They are an intermediary platform. They cannot impose on any law they cannot have their own law. They can have some kind of a rules of their own. They should not be
But the argument that this law is not evenly applied, that is the argument right now.
No, that's precisely I'm saying. So the one is the Twitter's behavior. It has been very inconsistent. It has they will, when the day we feel like, they will make sure that they will verify somebody's account. They will give a blue tick. They will give a whatever ticks. They will decide the manipulated content, or they will say that it is a bad content or a right content. This change that. So the Twitter overall, even in the US, that there has been multiple instances wherein they were very, very different. Now comes to the second part of it. Rahul Gandhi as a political leader, supposed to be one of the most responsible opposition leader of this country. He is going to sympathize to a rape victim's family to help them out, which is very good. As a political leader, as a social worker, he should do it. But the moment he take a picture of that and put it into the social media, he already made himself that he politicized that. It is done for all his political benefit, and without even, I can't say that Congress is one of the only party which has got a large chunk of topmost lawyers who are associated with it, and they don't even know this much.
I just want to say at this point that rape and sexual violence are political. They're political in the deepest sense of the word, but they also have electoral consequences sometimes. And Nirbhaya, what happened is a good example. The Sheila Dikshit government was rightfully held to account for what happened in Delhi. So I just find this argument that politics should be kept separate. 1 minute, Mr. Nambiar. What I want to do, you've made your point. Let's go around the panel again. Before Salman comes in, Pranesh, do you think the Congress has any basis to say that locking the Congress out is on orders of the government? And I ask this because with the coup co-founder here, we have had as irate a response from the BJP, which has also in different contexts argued that Twitter is politically biased. So before I come to Salman, I just want Pranesh, your perspective on this.
I think it's quite clear that it is on orders, or at least at the matter being taken up by the child committee that Twitter acted. It hadn't acted before then, and when it went before the High Court, Delhi High Court, it told them that we have taken it down because it violated our own community standards, and not citing a violation of the law, because a violation of the law, let's remember, has actually not been proven yet. No court has held that there is a violation of the law. I would say there is prima facie case to be made that is a violation, but no court has held so. I also want to clarify, though, on what I was calling patriarchal. I wasn't calling the law itself patriarchal. I was calling specifically the way it was interpreted in 2018 by Justice Deepak Gupta, where he made a very good start in saying why this law exists, because we live in a patriarchal society. There's ostracism of rape victims where there shouldn't be, and so on. And it's unfortunately far too many people in our society see being raped as something that that should mark you as who is a victim, rather than marking the person who raped you. Now, having laid all of that out, he very unfortunately, in my opinion, goes on to make a case later on against the advice of the amicus curiae, that even in situations where a person is dead, where a minor is dead, the media
Yeah.
cannot report that because there's a question of dignity. And this, to me, saying that you face a loss of dignity by being raped is a problem. So it's not about the consequences of ostracization and
Yes.
so on from society, which is the problem, but saying that there's an inherent loss of dignity even for dead victims.
I agree with you.
That is patriarchal, in my opinion.
I agree with you, but in this conversation, we need to separate two things. One is, do we agree with the law? And two, was Rahul Gandhi in violation of the law? And these are actually two separate questions, right? And before I come to Karuna on this, I just want Aprameya to respond to those, the complete politicization, and also Salman, of our social media networks. Aprameya, to you, a lot of people look at Coup, of which you're the co-founder of, as a platform for the right wing. Is that how you see it, or do you see it as a platform for everybody?
Not at all. As in, we don't see ourselves as politically biased in any manner. So our whole intention is that 98% of India today who have access to internet actually cannot express themselves on the internet. Their voice is absent. If you do not know English, your voice is absent. And that is what we built Coup for. And we're known for our language communities. We also have English. We're connecting the English-speaking audience to the language communities for the first time in India. We're giving a voice to the local language speakers. So our reason to exist as a technology platform is very different, right? Any technology platform should be away from any kind of political bias. We should only reflect and make sure that we respect the law of the land and make sure that we enhance societal discourse, right? But what Coup stands for is extremely different. It is for freedom of expression in local languages.
Okay, Salman, I again, to the point that I'd request Karuna and Flavia to clarify for us, and I agree with Pranesh. I actually don't agree with this law of not being able to show the faces of families and so on. But as long as it is the law, if it is the law, there could be an argument made that Mr. Gandhi and others who repeated his tweet were in violation of this advisory. Let's call it an advisory. In that case, what is the basis for the Congress, Salman, to say that this is a government directed thing? And you're muted at your end, so just unmute before you respond. Salman?
Well, Barkha, first, neither Rahul Gandhi nor the entire Congress party, these are not the only handles that have tweeted this out. BJP MP tweeted this out, and Twitter deleted that tweet, and Twitter deleted Mr. Gandhi's tweet as well. But the BJP MP is using her Twitter account, as I just discovered. The National Commission on Scheduled Castes, I think their tweet was deleted as well. This is, from, I think, November 2020. And that I saw that video today. So if anything, it's all about Twitter. Twitter is just a company. They're just human beings. They will, but I feel that this is not Twitter. Twitter is being forced to do something. They're under pressure.
But that's you feel that. How do you prove it? There's a terrible echo today. I don't know what the thing is, Salman, but how do you prove it?
Nothing happens. Nothing happens without Modi and Amit Shah doing something in India. Everything happens because of these two people. Everything. And we have to accept it. We know it. You know it. I know it. I mean, what's the point of saying, how do we prove it? This is an unprovable thing. But the government is serious about all this. Then they should basically investigate all cases, not just this particular case. Let them investigate everything, going back all 7 years, going back all 75 years, however many years, since 1947. Okay. Let them come tell us. But
okay. Hang on. Let me just hang on.
This is totally the BJP. They found it.
Okay, let me just get Karuna now in. Karuna, here's the question for you. As I see it, we're mixing up a whole bunch of issues here. One is there hypocrisy in the application of the law? Two, is this the law or is it a mere guideline? Three, yeah, is it a bad law? Right? These are three completely different things. And do they amount to a basis for the opposition of India to today say that Twitter is being controlled by the government, when we do have past examples where the same government has called Twitter bias and therefore led to a kind of exodus to coup, the platform that Aprameya co-founded. Karuna, go ahead.
So I think you're quite right to separate these issues. Firstly, you and I may feel, and I in fact do feel very frequently, that the power of a story is made much more real when the identity of the person affected is revealed. There is a human that is at the center of the story. The humanity of the person affected is something that really, I think, helps makes people realize that this could be any of us, or it could be, any of our children. But the decision is not ours. That's the point. The law turns on the fulcrum of consent. And only if that victim or the next of kin of the victim gives consent, and there is a mechanism for that under the law, can you and I make the decision to use the face of that person.
So are you saying every
Therefore,
interview
when
with
we
the
say,
parents? Are you
when
saying
we
every interview? I just want to clarify. Are you saying every interview? Let's say I had gone to the family. I did go to the family of the Hathras victim, and I interviewed the mother, and I asked the mother verbally, are you okay with your face shown? And she said yes, and I interviewed her. And then I shared that interview on Twitter. Are you saying Twitter could legally lock me out unless I had a written affidavit from the mother saying I have a consent?
I am saying that Twitter can and should, once intimated, take the tweet down. I am not saying that you should be locked out of your account, and that's where the distinction comes in.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
And so therefore, I think that when you're speaking of a child, right, and particularly when you're speaking of a child who is deceased, and you now think about consent, the ability to give consent, then the
So can I
question
ask you about Asha Devi again? I know you felt that we misrepresented you there, and I do want to understand what your position is. Asha Devi, as I remember, did not give a written affidavit to the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who interviewed her. Those
yes,
interviews were shared all over all of our social networking platforms. Are you
yes.
saying those platforms should have taken down all of Asha Devi's interviews?
I am saying that had Asha Devi was asked very clearly if she wanted to follow the procedure of the law and whether she wanted to release and have her daughter's name used and her daughter's identity revealed and photos used, etc. And, execute an affidavit and release it through a recognized social welfare organization. Asha Devi and her husband are absolutely lovely, but also very bright people. So this was, obviously the law is something that is a specialist zone. So this was explained to them, certainly not by me, but by others. And
Yeah.
I was told that they said, actually, we don't wish to do that. Now, with
Right.
regard to her own image, so she applied her mind and she said, look, I don't want to do it. So, which is
Yeah.
interesting because in particular interviews, I think she did say that she wanted to use her child's name, right? But then when
Yeah.
she applied her mind to it and she said that, okay, this is the process, and now really, like, do you want to sign an affidavit? She actually didn't, at the
But
time,
it's
told, want to do it.
yeah, it's really confusing though, Flavia, because I remember being at a public sort of rally against sexual violence with her. We're talking about Nirbhaya's mother, and she actually took her daughter's name from the stage. She was on the stage and she said, "मैं सबको बताना चाहती हूँ ये मेरी बेटी का नाम है." Now, what happens in a situation like that, Flavia?
Actually, Asha Devi also wanted that law that came, which is called the Nirbhaya law, to be known not as Nirbhaya law, but by her daughter's name. So she was all public there, and she really, for her, the concept of justice was that her daughter should be there alive, not in any other name but her own name, and put out there this is a heroic struggle and she paid the price, and whatever has happened after that should be in her daughter's real name and not in the name that media has given her. And the ironic thing was this was the name given by a media house, which I really don't like to use the word name Nirbhaya because it has absolutely no meaning. Having said that, but what we are forgetting is another case, what is known as the Katwa rape case. Now that's far more tragic. There, this 9-year-old child face and name and everything was flashed across the media until court gave an order that it should be blocked. By then it was everywhere. But that face, in fact, is engraved in our memory. The child, full frontal view, and as you said, that had so much impact. But what happens is, in most of the time, the way the media homes the family, the child or the woman is so disgusting. Even during the court trial, in one of the cases, which is also a high-profile case called Shaktivel's rape case, they had to actually wear burqa and come to court because media cameras were everywhere. And she didn't want this girl, about 22, 23 journalist, she didn't want her name to come out in the media at all. And
Fair enough. Fair enough. So yeah,
Yeah,
I get your point. I get your point, but I just need to sort of take final comments on the politics of this, right? And I want to come to PKD Nambiar and then Salman Soos. We've got to start wrapping up. Mr. Nambiar, you're right in saying that Twitter can't ignore the laws of the land. This seems to be the law of the land according to the lawyers on our panel. But and whether it's a good law or a bad law is probably a different program. But the lack of even-handedness in the application of the law, the reference to a major BJP leader not either having his Twitter account locked or his tweet taken down, this creates the impression of bias in the opposite direction.
This is where the problem and the hypocrisy of our opposition leaders of today. I don't know why we are even discussing it, except Shashi Tharoor. All the other leaders have, when Ravi Shankar Prasad's account was, then the IT minister during the thick and thin of that the controversy between the government and the Twitter. For some time maybe it must Ravi Shankar Prasad's account was taken out or suspended. And the same was happened with the vice president of our country. And so as RSS chief's blue badge has been taken away, so on and so forth. How can we have such a short memory? And that at the same time, there was such kind of a large amount of discussions, similar kind of a discussions that happened. And every Congress leader, at least in another 10 different panel discussions I had in different channels, I can tell you all the Congress leaders were very, very clear, except Shashi Tharoor. I'm telling you once again, except Shashi Tharoor, everybody was saying that, yes, it is all, the BJP is doing like this, that. So I don't think that it is not about BJP and Congress. I think it is any money-making platforms. I call them, they are all like a business houses, like what I do or what the coup does or what other panelists do. Maybe it's all a business platform. Okay. Let them not drive you and me. We are a democracy. We have rule of law in this country. We have judicial system. Let us go through that. Let no multinational company drives. In fact, I'm going to give you a clue. In another few days' time, I am going to the court. I'll be submitting some straight report, what I did it in the last week during the Bakri this thing. You will get to know that the truth of it. So I think the hypocrisy of the technical platform, the hypocrisy of some selective media, the hypocrisy of the people, some of the opposition leaders should go out.
But hang on.
The enemy, we all know. One second. I am talking about when it comes to a Twitter act, we all should be, there is no opposition or in the government. There is a multinational company and a platform. That is the way we should talk, not about the Congress did it or the BJP did it. Modi do not have that much of a time to run a multinational company or Amit Shah.
Okay. Salman, here's the question. Both Karuna and Flavia have explained at length to us that there is this law. I have to say that as a practicing journalist, I'm also in violation. I've been interviewing many of these families. Now, given that there is this law, does that change your perspective? Yes, Karuna makes the point that the tweet could have been taken down, without the locking out of these accounts?
Barkha, I started my comments with one thing. Twitter is not a law enforcement agency. Law enforcement in this country can do whatever they want with Mr. Gandhi and anybody else, but we have seen that they don't apply the law consistently. When there are elections in this country, the IT department runs after opposition leaders. Is it true or not? It is true, right? When Amit Malviya's tweet is shown, nothing has happened to him, and that tweet is still available today, the video. But the Congress leader's Twitter account has been locked for now 6 days. He's the main opposition voice of this country, and he remains locked out. Not that we cannot function without Twitter, not that we cannot live without social media. We can. But what we are trying to say is that despite Mr. Modi having 3.5 times the number of followers that Rahul Gandhi has, he's petrified whenever Rahul Gandhi says something, whenever he goes and holds a poor person's hand, these people are petrified. They're scared. Why?
Okay.
Because they have combined joined hands with the oligarchs of this country, and they think that they're going to run India forever. It is not going to happen. I want you to know. I want Twitter to know. I want BJP and RSS to know. They will be defeated.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to go to Aprameya and then to you, Karuna, and give Pranesh the last word. Aprameya, here's the question. How do you, as a co-founder of a platform, plan to keep it above politics, above the charges of selective application of the law? And how much of a role does algorithm, automated sort of calculations play in this? Because I remember being locked out of Twitter after sharing the phone number of someone who sent me a rape threat and a nude pic. And my way at that time, before I filed an FIR, was to say, here's the man, I want to name and shame him. And Twitter actually told me that I was violating that man's privacy because I had shared his phone number. They took the tweet down and they did lock me out. They did lock me out. So I'm just trying to understand, does it matter? Is it driven also by how many people complain about a tweet? I just want to understand how it works. Aprameya.
Yeah, so I think the best way to deal with situations like this is to be consistent and transparent, right? So if you can stay out in public, like right now I'm here not because who did something, but Twitter did something, right? But there is no representative from Twitter coming and explaining what these rules, why
Correct.
does it make sense? So the transparency that an India-based microblogging platform will give and the effort that we will make, because we're answerable, we're here, right? We live the Indian life, right? We are in the society. So I think that is very important. And in our case, we're basically saying Indian law we will abide by, but our own policies will not stop freedom of speech of anybody, right? We won't lock out accounts.
But freedom of speech is also, of course, subject to the laws of the land. Karuna, last thoughts? Karuna? I think Karuna's frozen. Oh, you're there, Karuna? Yeah, let me just unmute you. Yeah, go ahead.
So there's a way in which we speak of the law of the land as being something as grand as it is, but then sometimes beyond reproach, and we can't. It's not beyond reproach. It's constantly evolving. At the moment, what the law of the land says that if there is a lawful request, and I was arguing that case, Shreya Singhal, right? Which is that if there is a lawful request by government and that it is by a authority that is not below the rank of joint secretary, and so we'd have to see what the request from the child rights body, what rank that was. That's what it boils down to, right? In part, then you have to take it down. Now, what we did get in that judgment, and that's one of the things that I had argued, is that you must give reasons, and it must be open to challenge, and that there must be particular procedural safeguards, which don't appear to have been followed here, right? Plus, if Twitter's terms of service have been violated, and that's a whole different level, and I think that's really important because Twitter has traditionally been actually very good at protecting free speech and fighting for that. They've been very bad at taking down hate speech and dealing with that in any effective way. But they have actually across the world in multiple jurisdictions, including tough ones like Turkey, fought for free speech, including in court.
Yeah.
Here, the double standards are evident because initially they were being accused of going against government. Then you
Yeah.
had attacks on Twitter, raids on their offices, threats of arrest, and now you have 500 accounts of the opposition being
Yeah.
compromised, including Rahul Gandhi's account being suspended for 6 days. This is crazy. It's hugely overbroad. The fact that the main opposition leader's account has been shut down for 6 days is ridiculous.
Okay, Pranesh, I literally have 30 seconds. I'll give you the last word.
I tend to agree with everything that Ms. Nundy said. I think law of the land isn't just what, for instance, Twitter interprets it as, but what a court says. A court has not found Mr. Gandhi to be in violation of any law so far. It's also a case of the law as interpreted by the Supreme Court. It gives a very, very wide reading to the POCSO Act. For instance, it essentially allows for the parent of a victim to go in front of live television and say, my child was murdered, but not to say my child was raped and murdered, because for that they need the court's permission. And under 228A of the IPC, you need it to go through a recognized institution, a welfare institution or organization. As of 2018, at least, not a single organization in India had been so recognized by the government, according to the Supreme Court itself. And so since then, maybe things have changed, I don't know. So, but if a person has to fight on behalf of their child who's been raped and murdered, and they themselves would be in violation of a law if they said, my child has been raped, and not even naming that child, but just making that claim. Okay, that is somehow, to me, a very wrong law. And we really need to think about whether what kinds of changes we need to make to this interpretation. Let's again remember, this is an interpretation, a very wide interpretation of the law laid down by the Supreme Court. But I don't think it's the right one.
Okay, I tend to agree with you. The law seems absolutely... sorry, I have to close.
One quick comment. Twitter is doing its marketing and PR highly effective, free, without any money, and creating much money. And we all fall in trap of that. That's the truth. And you are sitting with another guy, co-founder. You can ask him, is it true or not?
Okay, as I'll have to leave it there. We'll bring back the co-founder of Coup for another conversation. There are many things mixed up here. Is the law desirable? I think we all think no. Is the law interpretative? We all say yes. I think Karuna reminded us, Flavia reminded us, laws are not static. There was a time when homosexuality was outlawed in this country. Are we saying that if someone had shown a photograph of two men or two women together, would that have been in violation? So interpretation also matters, and I think that's the important last point that Pranesh made. But clearly a political battlefield, Rahul Gandhi among key opposition leaders who's locked out. Twitter, you're right. I think the point was made, where is Twitter? I think Aprameya, you made that point. Where is Twitter? Why doesn't it come out and tell us why they've done what they've done? But we'll have to leave it there. Thanking our panel, Salam, Karuna, Pranesh, PKD, Flavia, and Aprameya. Thank you. And to our audience, lots more coming up on the Mojo Story. See you soon. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.